if I was to sit down and list a name of all of the awesome things that have come out of Western Mass, maybe I would talk about volleyball, which was invented down the street, the monkey wrench, the first gas-powered automobile, or maybe I would talk about something a little bit more recent. Tripod was created here in Western Massachusetts by our next speaker. Bo Peabody started Tripod as a student at Williams College. And that's just absolutely mind-blowing to me. I took a little trip to Williamstown this past weekend. It's absolutely beautiful. I would be scared out of my mind to start a company in a small, quaint little New England town like that, and my mind is simply blown. So with a round of applause, will you please help me in introducing our next speaker, a true innovator, an entrepreneur, and investor, Bo Peabody.
All right, there is no question I'm going to trip. I asked them to put a chair here because I may just have to sit down because I'm not sure this is going to work. And I also have some notes here. I'm not checking email or tweeting or anything. So not the best day to be selling Western Massachusetts. A little rainy. When we used to sell Western Massachusetts to people coming to work at Tripod from the cities, we would hope for sunny days or snowy days, and everything else was sort of we would say, oh, you can't come today. We've got something else going on. So thanks to everyone for having me up here. Everyone that's involved with Idea Mill. There's a lot of names on that list. I think I talked to or interfaced with like 6 people planning getting up here. So thank you to them. And also just to everyone who's involved with the supercomputing project. And it's a great thing, obviously, for Western Mass. I don't really know much about supercomputing. So tried to read Supercomputing for Dummies on the way up, but turns out that there is no dummies in supercomputing. So just my Western Mass cred. I've been sort of kicking around in Western Mass for 20 years. Actually 25 years, started by joining the ski racing program at Berkshire East. And was commuting out on weekends to do that. Ended up taking a year off between high school and college and going to the academy at Charlemont and living in Greenfield. And then ended up at Williams and started Tripod when I was a sophomore at Williams in 1992. Had half a dozen employees when I graduated and built the company there between 1992 and 2000 to about 100 employees, ultimately as part of Lycos. And then have remained in Western Mass. Actually, this is going to be the first year where my family will spend more nights in New York City than we will in Williamstown. So I'm quite sad about that. I've been told that I have to get New York license plates. But I don't have to become a Yankees fan. It's a lot easier to be a Red Sox fan in New York than a Yankees fan in Boston, let me tell you that. We're sort of like the kid brother in New York. Like, if they didn't have the Red Sox, what would they be doing, it's amazing that things like this exist now. I mean, I remember, sneaking around the Williams College campus, like looking for, a high bandwidth connection and lying to my professors and to my friends that I was working on a software project because nobody knew what the internet was, and things like this, sort of the idea of, innovation companies gathering and sort of feeding off each other wasn't really a concept. And now, you just have this happening in all sorts of different places. It's really amazing. So it's just great to be here. So the times have changed on that front. What hasn't changed, though, I don't think, is the task of growing a business outside of a major metropolitan area. Growing a business is hard no matter where you're doing it. But growing a business when you're not in a New York or a Boston or a San Francisco or an Indianapolis for that matter, growing it when you're in a place like this or like Williamstown is a difficult thing to do. And we did it. And I hesitate when I say that a little bit because, I'm on the record for being quite skeptical of things like Tripod, in that Tripod was not really a company. I mean, it was a company. We were incorporated, but it was a product, a very interesting product. I think a very socially valuable product. It allowed people to, it was essentially the beginning of social media. It allowed people to publish their thoughts and hobbies and everything online, and that was an important and still is an important cultural trend. But making money doing that and building a real sustainable business doing that turns out is very difficult. And so, I think that had Tripod been a better business, it might still have 500 employees in North Adams or Williamstown. And so, I always hesitate a little bit because I'm quite proud of what we did. But in my sort of current business incarnation as an investor, I'm quite more interested in funding things that have real business models. And I always encourage entrepreneurs, whether they're here or in New York or wherever, to really think about business models that have fundamental, pay attention to things like margins and which, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of cool things that aren't paying attention to that stuff, and that's fine. But I think it's actually even more important to pay attention to it when you're sort of living outside of the hype zone. So I'm going to, top 10 lists are so lame, but I'm going to give you one. I'm going to just sort of give you the top 10 ways that we built a company to 100 people in Williamstown. And it's really about how do you attract and retain employees when you're in a place like this. And I'm going to just sort of go without saying here. I'm going to just assume that in order to get to the point where you're worried about this, you have to have a good business or a good product, or you have to at least think you do, which sometimes can be just as good as having it. And so, that's going to be just taken as a given, that if you're dealing with hiring people, you probably have got something going. And so I'm going to sort of give you the 10 ways that we did this. Now, there is one way to do it that you can avoid all 10 of the things I'm about to say, which is just to pay everybody double. But if that's not part of your business and use of proceeds plan, then you're going to need to be a little bit more clever about how to attract people to your business. So, the first rule I always had was we hired an HR director as early as we possibly could. I think our HR director, we didn't hire an HR director, but somebody had that title very early on. And I think that person was probably the 5th or 6th employee, and they were doing a bunch of different things. Like they were the controller and the HR director, and they might have been doing PR. But give someone that title very quickly, and make sure that they report to you if you're the CEO forever and always. Just make it so that you send a signal to your employees that being an employee of this company is an important thing, and that's why the human resources director, VP, whatever it is, always reports directly to the CEO, and it's a person, somebody has that job early on. I think a lot of companies make the mistake of sort of demoting that position. Get a cool office. Like, if you're gonna be up here, you gotta have a cool office. We were sitting in the worst office ever in Williamstown. And Peter Barris, who runs New Enterprise Associates, was sitting in a chair, and we're complaining about how bad our office is. And he turns around. This guy who's from Washington D.C. He thought it was a pain in the ass to come to Williamstown for board meetings. He turns around. He says, "What about that building?" And he points to a mill building just like this one that was across the street from our offices in Williamstown. And we said, "Oh, there's some company in there making cables, rubber factory, like, I don't know. And he's like, well, it can't be full. The building's huge. And I said, well, we don't know. And he said, why don't you just walk over and ask them? So I walked over and asked them. They said, yeah, the whole 4th floor is empty. And he's like, it's just a raw space, but it's empty. And sure enough, a year later, we had built out a room that was exactly probably the size of this whole room with double height, these ceilings, probably 20, 25-foot ceilings. And it was amazing. I mean, just amazing. And when we would bring people up from New York or out from LA, I mean, they would just marvel at how cool the space was. And it's just important, people, if they're going to come up and work in a place like this, they want to be in a cool space. Just that's why these things exist. We have the ability to do that, so do it. And you have to have free soda and coffee and all that stuff too. I know that's a cliche, but you really need to do it. If you go to the Techstars kitchen in New York, you could eat that. You could eat every meal there. It's really amazing. So the state of the art is the Techstars kitchen in New York, and so you need to approximate that. Create an overly inclusive culture. I would have management meetings once a week, one-on-ones with my direct reports once a week, and an all-hands meeting once a week where there was a completely open mic and we didn't stop until everyone had said what they wanted to say. And we did that until we were 100 people. And at 100 people it was hard because it was almost to the point where we couldn't all fit in the same room, but we did it. We just kept doing it. And I think that you have to sort of, without being sort of kitschy, you sort of have to play into how people feel about places like Western Mass. It's sort of like, it's inclusive, it's cool, it's hippie, it's a little like, it's less hard-edged than the city. And you want to embrace that without being a sap. And create a culture in your organization where everybody feels like, wow, this is really cool. I can say whatever I want whenever I want. So you got to promote the heck out of yourself. I mean, back when I was doing it, it was actually easy because the web was so new and everybody thought it was the second coming. It was very easy to get yourself into Fast Company or to Inc. or People Magazine or onto ABC News. I mean, not easy, but it was a lot easier than it is today. But what we didn't have, what you do have now, is the ability to blog, to tweet, to make funny videos and put them on YouTube, to do stuff that doesn't cost a lot of money, and it allows people to come in contact with your company and with you. Because make no mistake, if you're going to build a company to 100 people in a place like this, you're going to do it a little bit through a cult of personality. Maybe not just around you, but around the 3 or 4 people who make up your sort of core team. And you want those people to be visible. I remember when Margaret Stewart came to run design for us. She now runs design at YouTube. She works for Marissa Mayer. And she came from Tisch program in New York at ITP, came up to run design for us, and the first thing she did was we're putting every single employee on the website. And I thought, geez, that makes a lot of sense. So every single employee, their picture, and now this is like what every company does, right? They have funny little pictures and funny little descriptions, and that's an important thing to do. It's an important thing to get yourself out there. So that people come in contact with your company, because they're not going to come in contact with your company because they're not walking down the streets of Holyoke. But they can come in contact with your company on the web. Plan company outings that highlight the local attractions that aren't found in the cities. Go take people skiing, take them hiking, go sailing, do things that people can't do in the city. Embrace that sort of rural, hey, we've got open space thing. I mean, those are the employees that you're probably going to get anyway, and so they're going to want that. I mean, we even went as far as to offer everyone a season's pass. The winters are the worst. I mean, if we were going to lose an employee, we were losing them in the winter. And so we would give everybody a season's pass and a 5-pack of lessons at Jiminy Peak, and some would use it and some wouldn't. But the fact that we gave it to them meant that they thought, okay, well, maybe next week I'll go, maybe next week I'll go, maybe next week I'll go. And then the sun would come out. And we said, okay. Do that. I don't know, is Mount Tom still in operation? You got to go to Berkshire East, right? Well, Berkshire East is cool. Do that. help people with real estate. Know the local real estate brokers. Know the local real estate market. Help your employees find a cool place to live. That's one of the reasons why they're going to come up here, because they can get space, because they can live in the woods, because they can live on a river, because they can, do something they can't do in the city. Help them do that. Understand, get to know the brokers. When you have an employee come up, don't just say, good luck finding a house in Holyoke. Say, hey, I know these two brokers, they'll help you. Hey, if you like living in the woods, this guy can help you. If you want to be able to walk to a coffee shop, this guy can help you. Like, really understand, because your employees are going to feel lost when they come up to a place like this. Make connections with the local colleges and the schools. Not just as a way to get employees, which it is a good way to get potential employees, but it's a great way. One of the things we have up here is just amazing educational institutions. I mean, there's just more colleges, in Western Mass than in many other places like this. And so make connections with it. It gives people interesting educational opportunities, auditing classes, being able to maybe teach a class. That's something that is difficult to access in a place like New York or Boston. Try to make connections with and even high schools, and even we had all of us volunteered to coach 5-year-old soccer. I know that sounds so sappy, but there was about 10 of us. We all coached soccer. It was so much fun. It was community service. It was a bonding experience. And people were like, wow, I can get involved with the community here. You just can't do that in Boston and New York. It's just too hard to do it. And up here you can do it. So help people do it. Now, all that said, the minute that you can afford to rent a studio apartment in Boston or New York and give your employees access to it, do it. If you grow your company to bigger than a dozen people, you will likely need to be in one of those places or both of those places fairly often. So it will make economic sense actually to do that at some point. But it will also give your employees a sense that, wow, if I needed to go down there for a night and get a fix, I could. Like, it's not, New York and Boston aren't gone to me. Like, they're still here. I can go there. That was something that we did when we got to about 30 employees. Really understand, if you get bigger than 50 employees, you're probably going to start attracting a lot of people who aren't 25 and single. You're going to need people who aren't 25 and single. And you're going to attract people who are 40 and who have a family and who are coming here for that reason. And so understand what the local options are for schools. We have incredible public schools, incredible private schools around. Understand what those options are. Don't just be the 28-year-old or 30-year-old CEO who doesn't think about that. Think about market to your employees, and if you're marketing to a 40-year-old with kids, that's what they're interested in. Trust me, I know now. And the last thing, which is not the last thing necessarily, it's certainly not the most important thing, but it is important. Get in with a great restaurant that serves modern cocktails and modern food in a modern setting. Know the owner, have all your company parties there. I know on the panel they said, party in your office space. Yes, but that gets old. Find a cool place, go there, have your company parties there, recruit there. Just make people feel when they come up from cities that there's a place where they can go and get a properly made cocktail and a properly made, we have incredible food resources around here. And that's something that people are very interested in these days. And the culture of celebrity chefs and local food and all that stuff is so important to the tech community. And you have incredible resources. We have incredible resources up here for that. So embrace it. So we were 60% of the revenue of this restaurant in Williamstown. 60% of the revenue. And one day, we would, every single night at 8:30, our entire employee base would walk down the 4 flights out of the rubber factory, walk down the road, go into Meze, eat, drink, party till 12:30, go home, go to bed, wake up, do it all again. Every night. I kid you not. And it was like we would bring people to recruit there, company parties were there. And one day, the owner who'd become a good friend says to me, I gotta close down. And I said, you can't close down. And long story short, I just bought the restaurant. That's how important it was to what we were doing. And I know it sounds trite, but at the end of a long day, getting a great meal and a properly mixed cocktail is something that 28-year-old single techies need. So don't make sure you know where to get it. So let me sort of close, and then I'll take some questions if people have them. And if you don't have any questions, I'll keep talking. So it's your fault if I keep talking. Let me close by saying that you have to think about growing a business up here not as a challenge. You actually have to convince yourself that it's better for your business to be here than it is to be in a city. I know they call Springfield and Holyoke cities. Maybe they are, but you have to believe that. And you really have to embrace, it can't be fake. I absolutely 100% believed that Tripod would not have been as successful as it was if we hadn't been in Williamstown. And the fundamental equation that drives the success, the way you should think about why it's better for you to be. Now, there's a lot of things about maybe your own personal lifestyle or whatever, but when you're thinking about attracting employees, which is really the issue, right? You got to attract capital. We can, if we want to do questions about that, we can. But assuming you have a successful business, assuming you've got something interesting, you have to attract talent. And the fundamental equation that works to the advantage of being here is that you spend a lot of time filling new positions, and you don't spend any time refilling existing positions. And it is a commonly accepted wisdom by the industry that refilling an existing position is twice as expensive to the company as filling an existing one. Because to refill one because someone got poached, right, is just painful. You got to find the person. It's okay, so you have to do the same thing you have to do to fill a new position, but you have the risk of all the stuff that they've done and transferring to new one and personality differences, and this person did it that way, and this person, you have a lot of your intellectual capital going to potentially a competitor. It's much more complicated to do that, and we didn't do that at Tripod. Our retention rate was 100%. I mean, we lost maybe 3 people. We fired some people, but we probably lost 3 people that we didn't want to lose in the whole history of the company. And if you can prove to the investors that you're talking to who are going to say, why are you there? And they're going to give you that whole thing, which they gave me. If you can say to them, look, the aggregate amount of time that I spend on recruiting is just a fraction of what somebody else spends time on. And the expense to my business is lower because I retain the people I get. And yes, it's harder for me to get them on the front end, but I keep them. And that resonates with investors. It resonates with customers who might be worried about whether or not you can fulfill on a contract if you're up here or whatever. It resonates. And I would always say, look, there's a pool of there's a certain pool of applicants for any job, and if Tripod, back then we just competed basically with any web company. We didn't have gradations in the web business at that point. So there were, let's say, 100 web companies on the East Coast, right, competing, 100 top web companies competing for jobs, and I'd say, I'm the only, there may be fewer people who want to work in a place like Williamstown, but those, I'm going to get them. Because I'm the only, of the 100, I'm the only one in a place like this. And so it's those types of statistics and ways of thinking that you need to embrace and you need to live, and you need to convince your investors and convince your customers that you can do this, that it's actually better for your company to be here. So that's it. I'm happy to take questions about any of that, or about Tripod or Village Ventures, venture capital. In the back.
So you mentioned capital a couple times, and one of the things that I see is you talked a little earlier about density of innovation. It seems to me there needs to be a density of investment capital too. And while in theory we can get investment companies from San Francisco or New York or whatever to talk to us here, what do we realistically need as a region so that venture funding is coming in here on a regular? Like, wouldn't it be nice if there was a venture person in the valley every Wednesday? Like, what would it take to have that sort of density? Like, what do we need to attract people like you all the time?
Trip. I saw Trip leaving the room during this. You have a venture investor here every day of the week. His name is Trip Peak. And I'm sure there are other people in the room here that hang around here either as institutional venture investors or as angel investors. You know, I don't know really. I mean, honestly, I don't know what the answer to the question is. You know, what has to happen for Holyoke to become Austin? You know, I don't know. A lot has to happen. And it ain't gonna happen in your lifetime or in the amount of time that you probably need to fund your startup. So I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about it. I would definitely participate in things like this and be a booster, right, to help it along. But you gotta go get capital outside of here. You just do. I mean, and you can. You know, you can. I mean, many of the most successful businesses, innovation companies created in the last 20 years have been created outside of major metropolitan areas. There's just tons of examples. And so people are used to it. It's not a big deal. You know, it's a little bit of a hurdle, I think, you know, for particularly in the very early stages. You know, I would encourage you when you're raising 100 grand or 500 grand to try to sort of source that locally if you can, and locally doesn't necessarily have to mean here. It can, you know, around. But when you're going to go raise $2 million or $3 million to really, you know, blow your company out, you gotta travel. I mean, the guys in New York are traveling to get the right capital. You know, the right if you're starting a software as a service business, the right capital is not in New York City for you. So you've got to go talk to Emergence Capital in the Valley. They're the best guys doing software as a service. If you're a good entrepreneur and you want the best guys, that's where you're going. So everybody has that issue to some degree, and I think you just have to embrace it. Yeah, you got to make it happen. Exactly.
Got it. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I have to say I missed the very introduction of your.
Well, that was the best part.
The one component I didn't hear you speak of in creating a company, drawing employees, and revenue as well, was the arts and the culture.
Yep.
And I find that interesting because that's what really exists in this area. I lived here a few years ago and loved it so much I came back to it. I probably shouldn't say I have a bias. I am an artist and an educator. But I moved up from the Baltimore, Washington area, and I see more happening in the arts and culture here, live music, fantastic visual arts, literature, than I ever saw down there. And having recently just heard that we now exceed in Baltimore and Washington gridlock in terms of New York and other areas down there, that it's much more accessible here. And
Yep.
that's a great thing to promote here, that you can get to these venues and these places inexpensively. You don't have to be in traffic on 495 for an hour and a half, and there's no $50 to $100 parking. So I would think that would be really integral to learn.
Did everyone hear what she said? Great. Then I don't have to say anything else. You're absolutely right. Just something I'm so involved with the arts over in Williamstown. I mean, I absolutely are right. I just didn't mention it.
My organization is trying to hire a developer. How did you find, what was the best way that you used to find good people?
So I fear that my experience in this is a little dated, just because we had a CTO who had a rule that he wouldn't hire any comp sci majors, which took me a while to get used to. But back then, we were building chat rooms and building message boards, and we had to build everything. And it required someone who wasn't caught in a particular box to think about how to do that. So we were sourcing, philosophy majors, and it was just easier to do that. What I think now, what gets engineers excited is tough problems. That is true then, true now, always going to be true. The best engineers want to be working on the hardest problems. And if you're going to be an engineer, if you're going to be if you really want the best engineers, your company has to have some hard problems to solve. And that's a difficult thing for a lot of web companies, because a lot of web companies don't have really difficult technical problems to solve. The web is a delivery mechanism for whatever the concept or product that they have is. And I think attracting really good engineers to that is more difficult. In the beginning, I think going after the colleges is the way that we did it, and probably is the best way to do it even today. And looking at the comp sci majors that are coming out of the 10 schools in the area, where the people are, it's like they view it as sort of, geez, it'd be a hassle to move. Why don't I just stick around for a year or two? Still got a bunch of buddies who are sophomores and juniors. I can hang out with them. It's an easy decision to make. And then that 2 years of that will give you the chance to get the thing going, and then start pulling, from other places. But I think that's probably the easiest place to look. And then, I've lost track of sort of what bigger companies are around out here, but going and poaching from bigger companies where you're using sort of culture, like they work at a big company, it sucks, it's no fun, the office stinks, like come work at my startup that's in a mill, and it's fun, and that, I think you can attract from big companies using that card.
Just as a comment to that, I would also say music and mathematics majors. Music
Yeah.
majors.
Math, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, say that again. You're
I've managed to grow a company of 25 people, hiring a lot of UMass students. To answer your question, find somebody who has a lot of experience in this area as like an architect that really understands how to build something, and use that as a catalyst of hiring people, and he or she can be your mentor to build your company. We hired mostly programmers, and it worked out very, very well. And I'd like to add, Bo, to what I really loved your story, growing to 100 people. I've used many of of the things that you mentioned. I was able to do with my company. I'd love to figure out, how do we get to the 1,000-person company?
Yeah.
You were at 100. I've gone to 25. There's others here, 50. You don't see a lot that have gone beyond 100, let's say, and that's that's a
I'm
challenge.
really glad you brought that up. So one of the reasons I made that comment about Tripod being a product and not a company, and regretting that, is that it's very difficult to just like raise money to 500 employees, right? You gotta make money. And if you start generating real cash flow, then you can grow your business, assuming you're in a big enough market, you can grow your business as much as you want to grow it. The funny thing about your comment is that lately I've been on this kick in New York saying the big problem, the New York startup ecosystem is the hottest startup ecosystem in the country right now. Everybody's thinks it's great, it's exciting. Every night there's something you can go to. It's great, right? But if you look at New York, there are no good big companies in the innovation economy, right? Our innovation economy companies in New York City are AOL and IAC, which are not good companies. So we need to do that there. How are we going to create 1,000 people companies here? That is what Silicon Valley has over all, and Boston, over all of these things, is they have big companies that provide shelter to engineers when they get in a fight with the CTO of the startup they're at, and they're like, I'm out of here, and they got a place to go. And that's why they don't leave the ecosystem. And big companies can afford to bring people from abroad and get them to a place, and then we can poach them into startups, But you're right, we really need big companies to really make an ecosystem that's never going to die. And that's what happened in Williamstown and North Adams, is that once Tripod left, we were able to scatter about 60% of the employees to the 5 or 6 startups that had started around Tripod. And then when 01 hit, none of those companies were profitable, and they all went away. And so you've got to create fundamentally profitable companies that are in big enough markets that you can grow to 1,000 employees. It's a problem that a lot of places are facing. Trip.
So, part of that equation is the ownership change, right, of a company. And for you, you had an ownership change to Lycos. What was the conversation like for you? You're at a 100-person company. It's really driving Williamstown and that whole Upper Berkshire economy for a period of time. Then you do the right thing for you and your investors and move that company into Lycos, which is a hot name, great company. And at that point, though, the whole game changes. What were those conversations like? Yep. Were there efforts to keep the company there? What were the reactions to that by the Lycos people? Give us some flavor on that, because I think that's a place where we in this region struggle. We have a lot of entrepreneurial companies. At some point, they get to the point where they're sold or combined with someone else, as is natural, and away they go.
It was a very simple conversation. Bob Davis, who was running Lycos at the time, said to me, Bo, as long as you stay, you can grow the business in Williamstown as much as you want. But when you leave, I'm moving everybody to Waltham. And at the time, that was hard to argue with. That seemed pretty fair to me. And so I accepted it. And, I had no preconceived notions about what I was going to do. But sure enough, after about 18 months and really 12 months, I was on to the next thing. I mean, you can't help, it's a sickness, right? We have the sickness. And Bob was quite gracious, actually, about the whole thing. He was like, that's fine, go have at it, but, I'm going to move everybody. And because that's what made sense for that business, actually. It made more sense for those people to be in Waltham, which was only 2 hours away, 2 hours and 15 minutes away. I mean, it made more sense for them to be there.
You guys, Occupy Northampton, Occupy Wall Street, they're not taking over Holyoke. They're surrounded by canals. We're good.
Are we part of the 99%?
I don't know.
I don't think so. Does that answer it? I'll talk really loud. Go ahead.
So our speakers later today, our last speaker, our keynote, Colin Engel, is working in Massachusetts as a CEO of iRobot to grow companies to scale in Massachusetts. He and some other executives actually are on a project to do that. So you may want to bring this up later today.
Great. Are we all set? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.